A review for test 1 from the second 9 weeks. So there's going to be a question just like this one. So remember what I told you to solve equations where you have fractions, you need to eliminate the fractions first. In this case, it's really easy because it's the same fraction, the same denominator. So all you have to do is multiply both sides of the equation by 8. So what happens when you do that? Well, you're going to distribute here and here, and then you're going to distribute here. So we're going to have 8 times 7 over 8 and then the x plus 8 times 1 equals 8 times 5 over 8 and then the x. So what happens to the x here? They become a 1. And also here. So you end up with 7x plus 8 times 1 is just 8 equals 5x. Okay, after this, combine the x's. So I'm going to bring the x's to this side. So that's 0. Bring down the 8. And that's a minus. Minus 2x. And then divide by 2. So that becomes 1. So x is negative 4. And that's how you solve this type of equations. Okay, there's this other type where you have the fraction like this underneath this whole thing right here. So we can eliminate it really easy again. When you have this one, I think these ones are even easier than the one on top. So since that means you're dividing this by that, I mean we're gonna do the inverse of division, which is multiplication, to eliminate that 5 because we want to try to solve for z. But you need to get rid of that to make it easy. So what happens here? I'm going to go ahead and cancel from the beginning. You can cancel this and you end up with this part only. So bring it down. Equals. And then just distribute, so 5z. Okay, now distribute in here. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times, there's a 1 here. 3 times 1 negative 3z equals a 5z. And then combine the z's. So we're gonna add, so that becomes 0. Bring down the 6, so that's 8z. Divide by 8. That becomes a 1, so z would be equal to 6 over 8, and that can be reduced to 3/4. So both of them can be divided by 2. 6 divided by 2, 3. 8 divided by 2, 4. That's the answer. Okay, you also will get an equation with decimals. Remember, for this one, we need to eliminate those decimals. Remember what I told you. If it's on decimal, the 10th place, to eliminate the 10th place, you multiply by 10. If it's in the 100th place like that, 10s, 100s, you multiply by 100. And if it's in the thousands like that, 0.273, you multiply by 1,000. So that gives you 3, that gives you 31, and that gives you 272. Now, usually on these questions, they're giving you all the decimals go all the way to the 10th place. you might have a case where one of these numbers has more decimal numbers. So the one with more places after the decimal, that's the one you use. Even though the other one's not, you're still going to use that one and multiply the whole thing by that. But in this case, they're both in the 10th place, so I'm going to multiply by 10, right? So what happens? I'm going to write it 10 times negative 0.3 x minus 4 plus 10 times x, because you distribute to that and to that, equals, and then you distribute to this. 10 times 0.05, 3 minus x. Okay, so 10 times that gives you negative 3 x minus 4, and then that was just 10x. On this side, 10 times that, 0.5 gives you 5, and then you have 3 minus x. Okay, after this, just distribute this and distribute that. So 3 times, there's a 1 here, 3 times 1 is negative 3x. Negative 3 times negative 4 gives you positive 12, and then you have the 10x. 5 times 3, 15. Minus, there's a 1 here, 5 times negative 1 is negative 5x. And then combine that term, so there's 2 of them on this side, so combine them first. So negative 3x plus 10x will give you 7x, and then plus the 12 equals 15 minus 5x. Okay, now combine the x's. So I'm going to bring these 5x to that side, so 5x, so that becomes 0. Bring down the 15, bring down the 12. 7 plus 5 gives you 12x plus 12. Now let's combine the numbers. So inverse would be negative 12, because that's positive. That becomes 0. Bring down the x, and that would equal 3. Now divide. So that becomes a 1, so you end up with x 3 over 12, so x is equal. You can reduce that by 3. 3 is common to these two. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 12 divided by 3 is 4, and that's the answer. Number 3. That's how you solve that one. Okay, the inequalities. So these are inequalities. So for this one, solve that first. So I'm going to rewrite it here. Okay. So before we can graph, before we can find the integral, we need to solve it first. So solve it like you would solve an equation, right? So you would bring the negative 6 to this side. So you end up with 0 here, and then you have x, 4x minus 12. And then let's bring the x's to this side. And I'm doing it like this on purpose, because so that you see the flipping. 0. So that's a 1 here. So 1 minus 4 would be negative 3x. So what happens to the signs? Not yet. So not yet. We still have a 12. Okay, when you subtract, nothing happens to the sign, so they stay the same direction. This is when, since we have to divide by a negative, that becomes a 1. That's when you flip the sign. So 12 divided by 3 would be 4 positive, because I divide by a negative. So just remember that. Okay, now we have the inequality solved. We solved for it. Now we need to graph. How do you graph? Find 4. Let's try here. And then what direction is x going? Remember that points away, but sometimes it doesn't if it's on this side. So we know it's pointing that way, but it's better if you read it and understand the concept. So x less than 4. These are the x's, and less is this way. I'll put it in reds that way. That's where the x's are going. And then you determine if it's brackets or parentheses when there's no equal sign. This one doesn't have an equal sign. You can have parentheses facing where the arrow is going. So the interval would be just follow the graph, so parentheses, and then 4, comma is going to negative infinity. Those parentheses, infinity always has a parenthesis. And that would be the answer for that one. Okay, the last one, it's a compound inequality. So you need to solve it also. So compound inequalities, imagine you're solving two equations simultaneously. So we need to solve for these x. So we're going to get rid of that number first. So we're going to do the inverse, add +1 since that's a negative. And that would eliminate that and then carry the 4x and keep the signs. So 2 plus 1 would be 3. Negative 3 plus 2 would be negative 2. And then you divide by that, 4. We need to get rid of that 4 also. Cancels, bring down the x. The sign stays the same because that's positive. So that would become negative 1/2 if you reduce that. And that one stays the same. And like I said the other day, I would make it into a decimal. That way you see where they are. So that would be negative 0.5 for that in decimal form. And that's 0.75. So now look for them on the line. Negative 5, so that's 0, negative, so that's half. So halfway right here. That would be the negative 0.5. 0.75 would be half, and then halfway again. So close right there, almost close to the 1. Now determine where the x's are going. So x is greater than negative 0.5. So that negative 0.5 greater should be this. These numbers are greater. So we put it in red, so this way. And that one says x is less than that number, so 0.75 less would be these numbers. These are the less. Like that, and if you notice, I'm using parentheses or brackets, parentheses because none of them have a equal sign, so you use parentheses facing where the arrow is going. So for the brackets, for the interval, you will use those two parentheses, use a fraction now, so negative 1/2, comma, 3/4. And that would be the answer. Thank you. This is a review.